Okay, that last video got cut off when I was talking about liquid. Anyway, anything from like a tablespoon or two to half a cup of liquid, depending on how thick or thin you want it to be. I actually like mine very thick, so or at least reasonably thick. So I don't add a lot of liquid. And if you have juicier fruit in there, such as the pears or plums or anything like that, that's going to give off a lot of liquid. I mean, apples are too, anyway. But so you don't really have to worry about that. Now, I do spray the liner of my crock pot just a little bit. Honestly, there have been times that I haven't. I just do it just to an abundance of caution, so to speak, just to make sure that nothing gets, stuck on the bottom. But really, if you don't panic. You will be fine because again, it gives off a lot of liquid, so it's going to be perfectly fine at the bottom. Um, but anyway, as far as liquid goes, you can add water. You can add, I've got some leftover apple cider, so I'm going to add just a little bit. I mean, I'm just going to splash some in. Honestly, you can add orange juice. I've done that before. If it's adult applesauce, you can add some wine. Whatever. So the liquid, I mean, if you add applesauce, that will give an extra layer of flavor. But more times than not, I use water because I don't keep apple juice on hand. So it is perfectly fine. Like, you're not going to go, man, if only I had used that apple juice, then this would be good. No, it's going to still be good anyway, even if you use water. I just happen to have apple cider, so I'm going to throw a little bit of that in there. But again, just a little bit is all you need, unless you want a very thin, runny applesauce, in which case, I'd add closer to a third of a cup, maybe a half a cup if you have drier apples and you don't have any other fruit in there. You could do that. Also, okay, here, let me go ahead and add. How much am I adding? Just, that's it. Okay, so that's good. But what I was going to say is, if you don't want applesauce, or I mean, as an addition to things you can do with apples in the crock pot, instead of applesauce, you can do the same thing that I just did, all of this stuff, adding maybe no more than a tablespoon of liquid at most. Put them in the crock pot, cook them for a shorter period of time. This I would probably suggest more like just with things like apples and pears. Although, okay, I say that, and plums would be really good too. Okay, so would peaches. What am I saying? Okay, do it with whatever, the same fruit. But you put it in the crock pot, and instead of cooking it for a long time, you're going to want to cook it on high for no more than 2 hours. I mean, give or take. The crock pot is super forgiving, but I'm just saying about 2 hours. And then you're going to have just really, really cooked down, seasoned apples and whatever. And you can, if you want to, then at that point, throw in just ever so slightly small amount of like cornstarch or some tapioca, or not. You do not have to do that. I mean, and I don't often. You could even throw in like some ground oats if you wanted to. But if you just cook it for less time, what you wind up having is cooked fruit, which is excellent on things like oatmeal or any hot cereal. It's also great on top of like ice cream or on top of plain cake or just all kinds of things. It's great on yogurt. Just a lot of things. All the things that you can imagine apples, cooked apples being good on, it's good on because that's what you have. You have cooked apples. Now, for that, I would not add anything more than just a little tiny bit of lemon juice. And honestly, you could skip the lemon juice on that one. You're not going to want very much liquid. You may or may not, depending on how you want to use it and just what your preference is, you may or may not want to add just a teeny bit more sweetener for something like that. But it's a great way, and especially if you have a smaller amount and you're not just wanting to make a giant batch of applesauce, but you just want some cooked up fruit to go on all manner of good things, that is a good plan too. But for this, I am going to wind up cooking this. You can cook it on high for like 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours. I often do it on low just because, I've got the time. So you can do it on low for anything from like 5 to 8 hours. Just the longer you cook it, the deeper the flavor will be and the more concentrated. I looked at the other video and I was talking about the seasoning and talking about it cooking down. Well, that's actually the reverse. What I meant to say was just that you're cooking it, and cooking it will mute some of the seasoning, but at the same time, cooking it down does, the more you cook it down, it does concentrate the flavors. But again, I've got a goodly amount of seasoning in here, but I also have a mess of fruit in here. So, but again, just depends on how spiced you like things. And I love apple butter, and this to me is sort of like the halfway point between applesauce and apple butter. I make it thick enough, and also once you chill it, it will thicken up too. The pectin in the apples will thicken up in the fridge some. Frankly, when I've done just the halfway cooking, not the applesauce, I've just eaten that business straight out of a jar, straight out of the refrigerator. Don't tell anybody. You can, it's okay. Anyway, it's really good, but it will thicken up some. I lost my train of thought because I was thinking about eating those apples out of the fridge, and they were good. I'm just saying, they were really good. Anyway, it's just so easy. So all you're going to do after that, they're going to cook, and what you're going to see is really brown looking apples. Brown from cooking, but also brown from the seasoning. You don't even have to stir in the seasoning right now. You can, but you don't have to. Again, you can, or you don't have to, and then you can stir it in at the end. If I haven't mentioned how forgiving this is, it's so forgiving. So what you're going to do once it's cooked down is you're going to want to blend it. And you can use one of these guys, the little stick blender right here, which is a great thing, and I highly recommend it for all sorts of stuff. But you can also use... You can use a potato masher. You could throw it in the blender, but that's just more trouble than it's worth, and you're dirtying a whole big thing, and you just don't need to. If you had a food mill, you could run it through that. That makes a super smooth applesauce and gets out the peels, which I don't really like doing. And there's not a good chance you have a food mill, probably, all things considered. But if you happen to have one laying about, you can use a food mill too and get the smoothest applesauce ever. But if you like a chunkier, thicker, which I really do. Oh, I know what I was going to say, is once the applesauce thickens up, if you cook it down really well and you don't add a lot of liquid to it, you can honestly use it as a spread on toast. I've done it many times. It's super versatile. And then when you want like the best pie ever, make yourself a batch of homemade applesauce, spice it up really well, and then I'm going to tell you how to make the best pie. It's applesauce pie. It's so easy. You can even buy a crust and it'll make it even easier. So here you go. Look how easy this is. Just put all that stuff in, put the lid on, make sure that it's plugged in, start it, set it, and voila. A few hours, you can do it overnight. Truly, I have cooked it for up to 10 hours before, just because I forgot about it. I was like, crap, totally forgot about that. And it was perfectly fine. It was perfectly fine. And also, added bonus, your house is going to smell so amazing. Like, you just don't even know. It's just going to be so good. And it's like you were just doing this, extreme bake-a-thon in your kitchen and you've really done very little work. So, in case that's of interest to you, there's that.